do about 1 million oysters a year, so at any given time we have 6 million oysters coming up through the pipeline. You know what I mean? So right now, this year, we set 1.75 million oysters. So, in a course of 2 weeks, I increased the population in this river by 1.75 million. What we do is more like ranching than farming, because we're not feeding the animals once they get out into the river. I mean, just like a rancher would take cattle and move it around, to different paddocks. I mean, we're not doing that, but every tide cycle for the oysters is another paddock. It's another, another billion gallons of algae and water that flow through here. So the wild oysters are a third of the price of my oyster. Just by virtue of how they're being created. They're being created with state tax dollars, essentially, which keeps their prices down. So I have to compete against that, which makes it very difficult for me to do business. I mean, I was going to the seafood distributors and try to sell my oysters for the price I was asking. They were laughing me out of the place. And then I would market the restaurants, and then I would tell the restaurant, buy my oyster at your distributor. So then the restaurant's calling the distributor and saying, I want Chop Tank Sweets. All of a sudden, this guy who didn't want my oyster 2 months ago calls me up and says, hey, I need your oyster because one of my best customers is asking for it. So you start selling them 5 boxes a week, and next thing you know, it's 10 boxes a week, and 20 boxes a week, and then you're into them for 30, 40, 50 boxes a week. We use our own broodstock. So what we do is as we're going through and harvesting our oysters, when we come across those extraordinarily fast-growing, beautiful shaped oysters, we set them aside. And then when it comes time to run the hatchery, we'll take those oysters that we've deemed, appropriate, and we spawn those oysters. So we bring them in January, we keep them real warm, we feed them a lot, we fool the oysters into thinking it's summertime, which is when they spawn, and that's when we spawn them in the hatchery, and then we take their young and we grow them. Oyster farming is not really novel. I mean, they've been doing it for hundreds of years. It's just new here.
Why? Why do you think it's so, in your opinion, why is it new here?
Because the state has been involved essentially in oyster aquaculture for the past 100 years by either moving animals around the bay or Horn Point, University of Maryland producing millions and millions of seed oysters and then dumping them down onto the bottom of the bay for the watermen to come and collect. I mean, that's oyster aquaculture. It's a very rudimentary form of it, but it is. If a waterman's going and harvesting oysters off a bar, and those oysters were produced in a hatchery on the Chop Tank River, is that a wild harvest? Our oyster population is at such a low point in our history, but we're still taking oysters out and eating them. There's a lot of people that say, I don't want to take that oyster out of the bay. I want to leave it there. To reproduce and to help filter the water. What we're doing is we're giving an alternative.